welcome back. Today, we have an extra special treat for everybody. My guest today is a respected business owner in the area. He has owned cafes, he has run farmers markets, he has made his move since 2006. He is a veteran, he is a musician, he is a purveyor of beautiful coffee and tea. My guest today, Jonathan Blakeslee.
Wow. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Thanks for coming on the show, man.
Yeah.
I moved to Portsmouth in 2015. I lived on Hanover Street.
Yeah.
And I would walk my dog, and I was becoming I was learning who I was as a human being and trying to get settled again. I was coming from Massachusetts. That's where I grew up, and I moved in with my girlfriend, who's now my wife, and I was like so enthralled with her and enthralled with the area, and we could walk everywhere. And she told me, she's like, "There's this really cool place down the street called White Heron."
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, man.
Nice.
And so I remember we'd walk our dogs there, and we would put Delilah outside. We'd hang her up outside the shop, and we'd go in and we'd have coffee and just a wonderful experience to be able to do that and to and then the more you learn about it, I was learning that there was, that you had good business practices, that you're using real food, and that, your employees, the ones who were there when I moved here in 2015 are still there. And so I just appreciate how you do business, and I'm very grateful to have you on the show today.
Oh, thanks. It's an honor to be here.
Awesome, man. Have you checked out some of the Dr. BeeWell stuff?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. You have some fun. You're full of energy for sure. And you've had some great guests.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'm actually your staff would tell you that I'm today I might have a little less energy because I'm on a protocol where I'm starting to do decaf, and so I've been for a while. I stopped drinking coffee when I moved to Portsmouth. I was heavy into coffee, crushed it,
Yeah.
and then I transitioned away from it. And your tea actually helped me do that. Not because I like to have something to drink, and
Sure.
the ginger mint.
Yep.
Is a special blend to me, and so I would drink a lot of that, and I got away from coffee. But then I love the taste of a cappuccino. It's like the greatest thing ever.
Yeah.
So I started drinking cappuccinos again and using them as a tool for like writing, and the caffeine would really help me. And then it's a slippery slope,
Yeah.
So I'm at your shop every day for probably the past couple of months, ripping up a cappuccino. And so last week we did the half calf. This week we're on decaf. So you might get a little de-energized, Steve, today.
That's okay. I think our decaf's very good too. It's,
Dude, you want to know what that's really cool about this, and you can explain this to me a little bit more, because like when you go to a store and you buy decaffeinated coffee, that's like really like there's like bad processes, more harsh processes that maybe that went through sometimes than when you're roasting it at somebody's local cafe. Is that true?
Yeah. What a lot of people don't realize about if you just go buy coffee from your general grocery store, it's if it's a local company, and if you check the back and you look and see when something was roasted, then you know something. But I remember there was an experience I had a few years back that, even though we're a coffee roaster, I had left work and I was supposed to bring home the coffee. And so I stopped at a grocery store, and I bought actually a package of coffee from I'll just say a well-known regional organic brand that I was thinking, oh, I was excited. I was thinking this is going to be great. I'm sure it's going to be at least as good as ours. I was kind of shocked. Freshness is a big thing. And a lot of times when something goes in a grocery store, I think a general grocery store, it's different. Like if you have a small, like locally here where Emery Farm, which they're a farm store and they actually stock White Heron coffees, but we roast fresh all 3 days a week, and they stock our coffee every week. So if you buy coffee like Emery Farm, it's all been roasted within the last week or so, versus sometimes in a grocery store If you just buy a package of coffee from, random company, it could be 6 months or old or more. And
all the benefits that could come from that, and we're starting to learn that coffee is like has effect on like longevity, and there's some serious stuff that's coming, which makes me feel like because I felt like I was doing the right thing by stopping drinking coffee because it was always like a noxious thing, and now it's actually really good for you. Helps you live longer, helps you protect your heart, like really amazing things that we're learning. But it's just like with food, things are going to degrade over time. That's what happens. So all the nutrients will probably degrade out of that, or the benefits that could come from it, and the taste, the freshness, like So that into it, I just know like these big decaffeination processes that they do. They have these big machines that they work with, and sometimes it's only cold water that they're using, and that's okay. But like there's other companies who use other things that are more harsh.
There's often chemical. They're basically a couple of two basic ways to decaffeinate coffee. One is Swiss water process, which you mentioned, and that's all the organic coffees that we have at White Heron and Chickadee are Swiss water process decaf beans. But if it's not Swiss water process, there are chemicals used to strip the caffeine from coffee. And so if it's not Swiss water process, personally, I wouldn't buy it. So
yeah, and it doesn't say that on the label.
Yeah, if it doesn't say Swiss water process, you don't know. And at least I feel like usually with the smaller company, they're gonna, you don't always know what you're getting, but it's good to read labels.
Yeah, definitely good to read labels and to educate yourself on that. But that's a whole other thing too. With labels, it's like you can have dried mango, organic dried mango, but you didn't realize that was actually dipped in sodium dioxide, and the sodium dioxide helps to keep it keeps it fresh, whatever.
Yeah.
But and then after the the dehydration process, they say that the sodium dioxide has been eradicated from the product, but there's been plenty of tests where people have gone back and tested, and there's still that in there. So it's like all these food additive and stuff. So I'm super grateful for you to be doing your part locally to help people that if they want that, a better served coffee or tea, they have access to it.
Thanks.
Yeah, man. And too, not to bury the lead, you said it, but what the chickadee?
What the chickadee? That was my little blurb. Yeah. So, I started, there it is right there. Chickadee Tea Coffee Eats, 43 Route 236, Eliot, Maine, USA.
Giddy up, baby.
But it's and we opened in 2020 at a right in the middle of the pandemic, which was funky times. But basically, like my friend Mark and I, we purchased the building where we are in I think 2019, and I didn't immediately have a plan to open a cafe, but once we needed to figure out what to do with what was the garage space, like have you noticed in there when you're in there that there are garage doors up on the ceiling? Have you noticed?
I love that you say this, dude. Like literally, I'm in there like yesterday, and I go in the store every day, guys. Like I'm in there every day because it's on my way to work, and I love them, and it's a great place. They do great coffee. People have been, we'll get into it today why I love it. And I look up. And because it's a very unique how you guys have the windows, and it's a unique building, and it's very different than the Portsmouth location because it's only it's as you've said in previous podcasts, it's your one booth farmers market.
Exactly, correct.
To be compared to your two booth farmers market in Portsmouth, and there's no seating, and that's to be honest, like a lot of the ideas to start this show and to become a podcaster and to become a creative, they happened in your shop. There was me sitting there with my laptop, enjoying a nice day, enjoying a coffee, a cappuccino, and thinking like, oh, I can do this. I can actually, separate from my life as a pharmacist. Yeah. And because that's my background. I'm a doctor in pharmacy, and I could, I can be this. I can do this. And so it happened at your shop. And so I'm in the store, and I look up, and I'm like, whoa, this is 100% a garage. This is a garage. These are the garage doors. And then I'm thinking like, oh, I wonder what he did. I wonder if he, and now you can tell me. I was like,
I could tell you.
I was like, with the windows, dude. Like the windows are beautiful. So those weren't windows beforehand.
No, they were not.
Right. So you just were like, we're gonna put these up, paint them white, and then paint everything, make it blend in, and what a beautiful job.
Boy, it was big doings for sure. Yeah, because again, what happened is it was like 2019, and nothing, the pandemic had not happened yet. And my friend Mark and I, and we bought the building, we started renting out spaces, and we were thinking, what are we going to do with this? And Mark was like, I know, we just rent it out to somebody that wants to work on cars. And I'm like, it'll just look like an auto body. It'll just be car carcasses everywhere. I'm like, maybe it would be good, because I've had, White Heron as a cafe since 2013 in Portsmouth. But, I started the company, at least on paper, in 2005, and in 2006, I was organic certified and hit the ground running. But basically, at least I knew how to create and run a cafe. So I thought, well, is there a need for that here? And then when I looked around, and I thought, I live in Eliot, and I thought, oh, this is my town, part of our community, of what Mark and I wanted to do. And like, Route 236, like a lot of, I don't even know what kind of route you'd call it now. I mean, it's kind of a busy connector. It's kind of like, I grew up in South Berwick, and I went to Marshwood High School.
It's the only way to get to South Berwick.
Yeah, exactly. So, but really,
there's other ways, but that's the most direct way to get to South Berwick from 95 is to take 236.
Yeah, and 236 in large part has mostly been, since the time I was growing up, just kind of like a busy place that you drive down through. It wasn't a place that you stop for things necessarily. It's like the country highway, but when Mark and we bought the building, we were thinking, like, what if we could make our little building a reflection of the cool, sweet little friendly town that it's part of on this busy route? And it feels like, yeah, like you guys and more things in town that are all becoming an opportunity to slow down and get off 236 and go say hello to your neighbors. But basically, so yeah, it was just a garage space.
Sorry to interrupt you, but
Sure,
guys,
sure.
just to let you know, he's talking about, when he says us, he's talking about OG Cannabis, which is the best dispensary on 236 for sure. They're the most friendly people. They're awesome. They take care of their customers. They have a great understanding of it, and it is cool to see 236 change into a place that people are coming into and utilizing in that way.
Yeah, it's becoming kind of a friendlier place, slowing down a little bit, hopefully. But yeah, so once I suggested to Mark that, yeah, maybe I think about opening another cafe. And we were kind of, I had to go through stuff with the town to get permission because it was change use for the building. And that just happens. But then when it was about time to start thinking about it, initially, one of our strong contenders for the original name was Chickadee Tea and Coffee. But by the time that we got around to being able to open, it wasn't until 2020. And after, boom, COVID rolled in. And then what happened is I spent 6 months trying to, I had to make massive adjustments at White Heron in Portsmouth to just, keep everybody, keep everything. Yeah. Keep the business going, keeps jobs going for people, keep the doors open for customers. And then,
what a tragedy! What a sick thing that they did to us, huh?
It was crazy,
pretty crazy, right?
Crazy,
yeah.
I know. But then 6 months into it, Mark and I were discussing, and I had to decide, okay, am I going to do this at what was White Heron, Maine, and now Chickadee, or do we rent it out to somebody else? And I decided, well, I just needed to do it, and it was super risky timing. So I just decided to open, since White Heron was an established brand, I decided to open as White Heron, Maine, because at least people would know who we were. Mm-hmm. And I think it was a good choice, and that's who we have been for the last 5 years. But this being our 5th anniversary since we opened, my wife and I just decided, oh, maybe it would be a fun time to do a little rebrand and surprise everyone with the name that we had thought about opening with in the first place. So we are now Chickadee Tea Coffee Eats, and Chickadee is the state bird of Maine. So,
Oh, okay. So I didn't realize that the chickadee was the state bird of Maine. But it's
yes,
so fascinating that really. Well, no. Let me ask you, because you grew up in South Berwick. So
sure.
is that the reason? Were you aware of that when when in your brain when you were thinking of the initial names for White Heron or for Chickadee that the Chickadee was the Maine state bird and you were from Maine, or was it a coincidence?
Well, no, I did know that.
Okay.
The one thing with White Heron that I've been asked, and I will say it's funny, I didn't think about this at the time. Do you know who Sarah Orrin Jewett, the author, was?
No.
Have you heard the name?
No.
She was a South Berwick, Maine author in the 1800s, and she had a very famous story called A White Heron. However, I completely forgot about that when I started White Heron Tea and Coffee in Portsmouth. And you might appreciate this being with like your background as a pharmacist or, and et cetera. But I was, before I started White Heron, I was living in Portland, Oregon, and I just happened to get homesick. But I think the year before I moved home, I was working for a tea company and I really liked what I was doing. And once I was moving home, I thought, how would I keep doing this, moving back home where I am without moving to Boston or New York? And so, but one day I was dealing with some type of, I don't know, some pain issue. And I had a friend who was an acupuncturist, and I was waiting in her office. And there was this beautiful framed print on the wall, and it was from this Japanese painter, I think in the 1500s, but his name was last name was Baitsu, but it was called Heron and Lotus, and I got that stuck in my head. Just the image of it, and I eventually found it in a shop. And when I learned more about the heron or a white heron, it may be similar with cranes, I'm not sure. In a lot of Asian art is a symbol of longevity and purity. And then, so when I knew I wanted to start an organic tea company, the reason for that was that, I had worked for a tea company that had some organic teas, but they were probably about 1/5 of their offering. But I just knew that if I was going to start something, I wanted to be selling something that I knew was not, doused with pesticides and chemicals. And that's why I chose to start an organic tea company. That's actually where the White Heron name came from. It only happened years later that when I came home and people were saying, oh, is this because of Sarah Orrin Jewett's story, A White Heron? And it wasn't, but you never know. Maybe it was subconsciously in my head somewhere.
Yeah, because you'd heard the story as a kid growing up. You were familiar.
I forgot all about it.
Can you say her name one more time?
Sarah Orrin Jewett.
Orrin Jewett. Yeah, I can't wait to look up the story and do some research on that.
She was quite a prolific writer. She wrote, and a lot of the stuff that she wrote is all set in or around South Berwick or southern Maine. So
yeah, it's great. You think of like history, the 1800s. It was like a woman writer. I actually took a class in college called Women's Writers. It was good. It was a good class. We learned a lot about all these great women writers. Yeah, man. So the like growing up here, did that have like because I think about this a lot. Like when I was a kid, I didn't want to necessarily be in my hometown, and and that's probably why you got away. But now, I maybe would want to go back to my hometown and return there and build business there. I'm too enthralled in the seacoast up here, and I love it too much up here. And this is now my home, so I'm not going to leave. But like I do get pulled a little bit back, and that's just like a really interesting, interesting bit to be a local business owner, especially in somewhere where like Portsmouth, where you're seeing a lot less of that now in this day and age.
Yeah. What part of Massachusetts are you from?
I grew up in Easton, on the South Shore.
Okay. Yeah. It's funny. Yeah. Like you said, for me, initially, I just wanted to get away. I mean, it's funny, as a kid, I felt like, oh my God, this is the best place ever. I grew up in the backwoods of South Berwick on, my family, they bought in 1976, like an old family farm, 33 acres. And we initially, when we moved there, I mean, it was a stretch from my parents. My dad worked at the shipyard, and my mom just, looked after us boys until she eventually worked for the shipyard too. But we just, it was a pretty ideal childhood. We grew up just running around and cross country skiing and under the moon at night in the winter. And initially, when we moved there, we couldn't even see our neighbors, until we had neighbors that moved in, and that was good too. But it's funny. And then, as a teenager, we go through life, and then I'm like, oh, this place is so boring. There's nothing happening here. And so actually what happened is because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do next, I figured I'd eventually go to college, but I didn't have a specific plan, when everybody's grilling you, like, what are you doing with your life? So I was like, I don't know. So what I did is I joined the United States Coast Guard, and mostly knowing that I would get some opportunities to travel and get some life experience, and I did. So,
Jonathan, who gave you that advice? Because that is amazing advice, and for any young man who's listening to this show, please hear that. Please hear that. Don't just go to college or make an investment in college and spend a lot of money and take out loans to do so if you don't know what you want to do. Experience life. Go live a little bit.
yeah, well, in part, like for me, a lot of that was a response to, I had some older friends that had gone to, I knew so many people that when I was a teenager, so many people that were in their young 20s that had their first degree that they were still trying to pay for. And by the time they got their first degree, they figured out what they really wanted to do. And it had nothing to do with that first degree. So they got out of school. And even at that time, when it was a $50,000 or $60,000 debt, and now that would be what, 150 plus.
Yeah, 150 plus two.
Um,
Now that was when I was in college. Now, if you're looking at it, it's like 3.
okay, don't tell me anymore. I'm gonna freak out.
Yeah, dude,
But-
it's insane.
No, but really, that's kind of what happened for me. Is I felt like I knew a lot of people that, they're getting out of school, and they kind of felt stuck because they just felt like, whether they self-financed it or their parents helped them, or, then you feel like you're making choices. You're making life choices based on, I don't know what to do now. This is what I chose. So I decided to join the Coast Guard. I went to boot camp, which was kind of stressful. A couple of
It's
weeks.
amazing that an 18-year-old kid, though, was able to make that decision, is what I'm saying, though.
Yeah.
And hear that other 18-year-old men, because that's like, I didn't hear that. I said, oh, I went to pharmacy school, and now I'm a podcaster, and I'm a content creator. I'm glad that I went.
But you know a lot of stuff.
I know a ton of I know a ton of stuff. I paid a lot of money for a ton of stuff, and that's good. It's fine, it's helped me. It's definitely helped me in my life. But it's like, if I just want other young men to know that, like, you don't need to go to college. You first, if you want to, if you figure that out, especially men. We're 18. We're just we're immature. We're just, give me the world. I want to see it. And so if you want to experience life, go and experience life. So continue the story.
Oh yeah. So really, it's, and I joined the Coast Guard because I didn't feel myself destined for a military career, et cetera. And the Coast Guard was the least military. And the Coast Guard, oh my God, what a hardworking outfit. They might have shifted departments. I don't know. It was Department of Transportation when I signed up. But basically, so I graduated high school, or what is now Marshwood Middle School in Eliot, used to be the high school. And then, 6 months later, not even 6 months later, I went to boot camp in New Jersey. And then I did pretty well in boot camp. They actually, at least in the Coast Guard, they rank you based on how you perform overall in your company in boot camp. But I test, and the Coast Guard is pretty, it's physically demanding, but it's also, you have to test on all these things. Oh my God, I feel like the craziest experience I had from that was fire school or whatever. They light a concrete building on fire, and they send you into the building with, like a fireman's gear, and like you got to crawl under this. They want you to know you have to have an experience of something like that. So, if that comes up, otherwise you're going to be like, what do I do? But stuff like that was scary as hell. But anyway, so I went there, and then, it was interesting. Like, also talk about life choices, right? When you're so young, I'm 18. And so I did well enough in boot camp that I had a choice of, like, I could have gone to California or Florida or Hawaii or whatever, all the places that, why wouldn't we do those things when
Right.
but the thing that hooked me is, and my parents, I will say, thank you, Mom, Dad, for subscribing to National Geographic. Because what happened was, as a teenager, I remember always flipping through the National Geographics at home, and the two places in the world I wanted to go more than anything were Japan and New Zealand.
Why?
Oh God, they were so beautiful.
Because
I
the
love
pictures.
the pictures, the stories, and things like that. And I was a bookworm and National Geographic flipper as a teenager. But there was a Coast Guard station in Japan, Hokkaido, Japan, which is it's kind of like the New England of Japan. It's the northern island. At first, my mom in particular was nervous because when she looked on a map and she saw how close it was to Russia, she was like, "Oh my God, what are you guys doing there?" And so, but it was
back then, yeah.
Yeah, it was a long range aids to navigation station, which basically they triangulate. They would broadcast a signal from 3 places, and based on that, back in the day, that's how a ship or an airplane would determine where they were on a map. So that's what we did. But anyways, I had an amazing experience there. And probably also specifically because I was the youngest person on a 30-person Coast Guard station. I was the youngest person by 4 or 5 years. Most of the guys on the station, there weren't any women on the station I was at, and most of the guys were between the age of 30 and 40. And so I didn't know how to fit in. Like, I felt kind of weird, but I think I had a good experience because of it. It was funny. Even I remember there was a voluntary reduction in forces, and I'm in the Coast Guard 6 months, and I decide, I'm not sure if I like this. And I approached my commanding officer and I said, "Sir, I saw that there was a voluntary reduction in forces. Can I apply to that?" And he said, "Son, you just got in. You can't get out." I'm like, oh no.
Oh, I love it.
However, he was very cool. And like one day he said to me, he said, "Well, get your gym bag and meet me at 4:00. I'm like, uh-oh, what's this for? But he took me to meet his karate teacher in Japan. And so I ended up studying. This was still nerve-wracking, though. I'm still 18, or maybe I was not almost 19 at that point. But suddenly I'm going to study karate with my commanding officer and his Japanese teacher every week. And so, but honestly, I would say, thank you, Mr. Walters.
He realized it. He realized, probably saw it. He's like, oh, this guy's younger than he needs a little giddy up, and
Yeah.
I can provide that giddy up.
And he did. And, next thing I know, so I'm training like that. And then even when our commanding officer moved back home to the States, I kept continuing with the same teacher.
Cannabis products are becoming more popular every day. Whether you're looking for the best night's sleep, trying to mitigate daily stress, or just trying to enjoy some laughter with friends, OG Cannabis is the store for you. OG Cannabis has an unbiased approach that is unique and simple. Unlike the competition, they don't sell their own manufactured products, but instead proudly showcase the best vendors across Maine. A dispensary like no other. Come and visit today at 18 American Way, Eliot, Maine. OG Cannabis. Oh, and don't forget to use my promo code, Dr. BeeWell. See you guys there. Giddy up.
But I had a lot of really unique experiences in Hokkaido because I was so young, and so I ended up being a little bit of a loner. But a lot of the other guys on the station, they all go out drinking and doing their things or whatever. But I think because I was just so young, I had a lot more cultural experiences. Not to say that a lot of them didn't. There were some guys that were, very much into going and checking this out or that out. But I wandered around, and that's kind of where I got hooked on tea. is I remember walking into a beautiful tea shop, and it was my first time seeing, call it a kyusu. It's like a Japanese side handle teapot. It's like a little, looks like a teapot, but the handle's on the side and instead of on the end.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember buying some sencha green tea leaves and feeling like, wow, this is so special. And I remember sending some stuff home to my family. But after that, when I got out of the Coast Guard and I moved home, after that, I moved to Seattle because I initially had planned to go to college for Japanese language studies. And I thought I would keep moving in that direction, but I ran out of money. I was broke. Jobs were like hard to get at the time. But I ended up living down the street from this beautiful little tea shop called Tea House Kuan Yin that I think is still there. I hope so. That was well over 30 years ago.
You haven't been back?
I haven't been back.
You got to go back.
I lived in Portland, Oregon for 7 years. And while I was there, I made trips to Seattle back and forth, but
yeah. So so that's amazing. So you're at the tea shop and you just, that's kind of where you were able to like learn more about tea and, so you never did school. You went to school, but for a little bit out there, but then you stopped doing it.
Well, basically I got out of the Coast Guard with some money for school, but it was only so much. It was like 14 grand, but I think I made good use of it. Initially I had enrolled in some classes, but I was broke, and then I really needed to work, so I had to like cancel the classes, get my money back to pay rent. But eventually, when I did, I went to culinary school, and I went to culinary school. And initially, I thought I'd want to be a chef owner of a conventional. Well, actually, a vegan restaurant, because I was vegan when I went to culinary school, which was also unusual. I think I was the only vegan.
How'd that happen? How did you become vegan back then?
I just did. I mean,
it's like people didn't even know it was a thing. People didn't even know it was a thing or anything. I didn't know it was a thing until maybe 2010.
Well, I'm not vegan now. I'm only a partial vegetarian now. But at the time,
I like that description. First off, I think I'm also like a partial. Like, I mean, I'm full on like regular omnivore now. But for a while, I was a partial vegetarian.
Yeah. Well, I think I had even. Definitely as a teenager, I think even before I joined the Coast Guard, I probably initially from National Geographic, I got interested in Japan. And then, but of that, I started reading more about Japan and Japanese philosophy and things of that nature. But eventually, I started eating more vegetarian food in general.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I went to culinary school, actually the hilarious thing for me in culinary school, because I was a diehard vegan and I still had to go through butcher shop class, but I had to do everything that was required to pass. But I remembered when I had opportunities to make my own things that were always vegan, one of my chefs, and I wasn't even trying to fool him, I made this, you know what seitan is?
Yeah, seitan, yep.
Yeah, seitan. So I made this like seitan barbecue, like, and I remember telling my chef, this is vegan. This is seitan, barbecued seitan that I made. And he tasted it and he said, oh, this isn't vegan. He said, is this pork? And I'm like, no, man, I told you this is vegan. I made it. It's seitan. And he's like, are you sure this is pork? I'm like, it's not pork. But anyways, I thought it was hilarious that I was not even trying to, it was authentically vegan, but somehow my chef, who's a chef culinary instructor, actually thought it was a meat item. So
you were ahead of the game, man. You were ahead of the game.
I guess
you should start serving that at White Heron.
Oh, you never know. Actually, my wife Joelle, she makes a very good barbecued seitan. Okay. I'm in trouble now because now people are going to ask for it. And she's going to say, oh, I don't have time to make that.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so we'll have to be careful what we say.
Be careful what you say. Okay. Sorry, Joelle.
All right.
Yeah, giddy up. That's it. It's just, did it also have to do with like respect for animals?
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, between respectful for animals and for health reasons and things like that. Actually, I do remember, now I'm trying to remember his name, but Robbins. He was heir to basically part of the Baskin Robbins family. I'm trying to remember his name now. He's an author. He's vegan. but I remember reading his book, and he was talking about just the amount of resources that that goes into, meat production, like large scale meat production, and how, yeah, it was a little bit. After that was hard. It was hard.
Eye-opening, yeah.
Yeah, hard to not be vegan.
Yeah, that's the thing is like for me, I was on like this health journey where like, I stopped drinking coffee and I was, I lost a ton of weight and I started to get healthy for the first time. I'd been healthy in my life before, but I'd never really like had an awareness of my body before. And so I became, like, because the grossness of the supply chain had always really bothered me.
Yeah.
And so like I just never really partook it. I was like, I don't want to partake in that. And so I got away from it, and my wife's a vegetarian, so I became vegetarian for a little while. But I'd still eat meat like once every other month or so if I felt like I wouldn't like stop myself from it if I felt like I needed to. But then I get to the point where now I engage a lot locally with people who, are growing their animals, and they're,
Sure.
a lot of them are, a lot of it's like grass-fed beef and pasture-raised chickens and, pasture-raised pork. And, the eggs are, like my homie down the street's eggs,
Yeah, sure.
So it's
Yep.
like I feel much better about it, in doing it now. And I feel like there's less resource going into, like, these people wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't helping to provide for them and their family. They wouldn't,
Sure.
they wouldn't be continuing to run their markets you've been, you were a farmer's market guy.
Yeah.
So I love having those relationships now. So I do eat meat currently. And I it's going okay. I think I enjoy it. It's all sourced from people who I trust and know. Most of the time, I can't always do that at every like restaurant that I go to,
Yep.
or whatever. But for the most part, that's where I get it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree with all that. And I think what happened, there were two other things that happened to me that kind of made me a little bit more flexible in terms of my strictness about being, vegan or vegetarian. Is in the Coastguard, they weren't going to make extra portions of anything. So whatever we had to eat was what we had to eat. And so if you weren't going to eat it, all you would have was a little pile of green beans and mashed potatoes. I mean, it wasn't like we couldn't go in and make our own food. You couldn't customize your life, as it just out of boot camp, et cetera. And so, so at that time, and I also observed that in one of the things
So you were vegan in the military?
I started that way, but I was going to starve.
Yeah, because you couldn't have your own choice, right?
I couldn't have my own choices. But at least what I did observe in Japan, this had nothing to do with the Coast Guard per se, but I do feel like what I observed in Japan is where animal foods are part of so many meals, but proportionally the amount of, like, let's just say a serving of meat in the US versus a normal serving of meat in Japan, the serving of meat in the US is probably 2 to 3 times more, or 2 to 3 to 4 times larger than the size in a Japanese meal. And, in the Japanese meal, fish are basically the proportion of vegetables and rice and things like that is much larger in the diet than it is, in the average American meal. That's a little bit more meat centric. And so when I started observing that, so I guess what I started trying to do was, as I started eating meat again in the Coast Guard, is I almost tried to model as much as you can model, looking, at the Japanese diet and then looking at what your choices of potatoes and, mashed potatoes and green beans or whatever. But I just adjusted the portions of what I would eat in ratio to what I had for, vegetables and.
They didn't give you any good food? They didn't give you any good Japanese food over there? Or just shit American food?
Not in the military. Not in the military. I mean,
you get off base sometimes and go have your own fun and do your thing, right?
And actually, when I got off base, I mean, I loved like Japanese ramen and yeah.
What do you think of the ramen spots around here? You ever go to any of them?
Yeah. I mean, it's, like, I think Anju has some great noodles and stuff like that. It's like, it's funny with 2 cafes now, pretty busy to the point where we don't get out to eat that often.
Yeah. Well, Joel said that to me this morning. She said, "Yeah, we could go out, but all the restaurants are closed on Monday and Tuesday."
Yeah, something like that.
Days that maybe we could go out, that we're less busy.
To be honest, and this is 100% true. Joel is my favorite chef she's the best cook around, really,
Yep.
from my taste. And so,
Yeah. So
we,
why go out, right?
you know, we go out here and there, but like, you know, we have cute little cats at home, and she makes great food. And so, and it's fun to go out and, you know, go out with family and do stuff like that. And we do like getting out to support a lot of local places when we can. But we also like being homebodies because we're pretty busy. So
Yeah, there's a new spot in Dover, newish spot in Dover. It's probably been there now for like 5 years. You know, but it's called Hong's Ramen, Hong's
okay.
Noodle Bar. They're a good spot too.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, the producer Hutch and I were there last night. We were crushing it. It's good. Shout out to Hong's. They're good people over there. We like them.
Woo!
Yeah, giddy
Hongs.
up. Yeah, giddy up. Anju's great too. You know, we're gonna go to Anju next to do some comparison.
Nice.
Yeah, giddy up. We'll let you guys know. Yeah, so yeah, that's awesome that you had experience with like Japanese culture, and then you got to come back here and you know, go through the, you know, Japan must have. But how long were you in Japan?
Just over a year.
Just over a year.
Over a year. Yep.
Okay, and then how long were you in the Coast Guard total?
I had a strange enlistment. I was connected for 8 years. Basically, what happened is, like probably everybody else at the time, I was prepared for my minimum 4-year active duty enlistment. But one time, my recruiter, this was some strange program that just came out around the time I was just going to actually sign up. He said, "Oh, we have this new program. It's 2 years active duty with 6 years inactive ready reserve, which means effectively you become part of the reserves, but not in an active way." And I thought, wow, okay, I'll try it. And so I signed up. So I was in for a little bit over 2 years active duty, and then I was connected to the Coast Guard for the next 6 years, but I didn't actually have to go in and serve. So, but
did you have to still like keep up on stuff?
You know, at that point, really, I just had to pay attention. And if they sent me stuff in the mail and they told me to do X, Y, or Z, that's what I had to do.
Yeah.
But I didn't have to. I mean, and I think that was the right choice for me at the time, because I almost, if I could have stayed in Hokkaido, Japan longer, I would easily have, you know, stuck it out for 4 years or more active. But I couldn't stay longer, and so I probably would have had some choice, but a lot of times what it would be is like, okay, pick 3 places, and you might be lucky to get one of them, but you didn't know what it was going to be.
Right.
And so I thought, okay, I can get off the ride now. And so I did. I got out, and, you know, I got some education money, and
Next stop, Portland.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, and then Portland, then back to the Maine, then Seattle.
Actually, it was Seattle first.
Seattle and then Portland.
Yep,
Okay,
Seattle. Then I
Maine.
moved back home for a few years, and I went to Portland, Oregon for 7 years, and then I've been back home for almost 21 years.
Almost 21 years. Do you mind me asking how old you are, or when you were born?
How do I feel, or how?
You want to know?
I don't care.
Okay.
No, I'm 55. Yeah.
55. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Because
But I could still pass for 54. So.
Yeah, you can still pass it for your 40s, brother. You know, who cares? And the other thing too, age is a number. You know, who cares? Like if it is about how you feel. You know, how do you feel? You feel great?
I feel good.
Okay, giddy up. That's what matters.
Yeah.
Now, did you always think that you'd come back to South Berwick? Do you always think?
I didn't. What happened for me when I was out west, initially in Seattle, it took me a few years to kind of settle in. There was, you know, it was hard getting a job at the time. I had good experience and all this stuff like that, and being a veteran didn't matter for anything at the time. But anyways, by the time I finally got a good job in Seattle and all that, it's like at a certain point I started feeling homesick. So I moved back home for a few years, and then I kind of missed the Northwest, and I decided to move to Portland. But basically what happened is when I was out in Portland, and I was just in the process of buying a house out there. But I hadn't found one, and I still was living with, you know, 7 roommates, as you do at that time of life. But I remember 9/11. I remember I woke up and I heard my roommates yelling at the TV, and I came downstairs. I'm like, "What are you guys yelling at the TV for?" And they're like pointing Twin Towers, and I just started feeling homesick right then. But shortly after that, I did end up buying a house, and so I was still out there for a few more years,
No.
for 3 more years.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
but I guess I thought, oh well, maybe I'll just, I finally had the opportunity to buy a house, and then, but from that point, I just felt homesick, and so I moved back home.
Nice. Got things started here, and then you started the wholesale business, and
Yeah.
started the farmers markets, and built it from there. Built up the community. White Heron opens in 2013.
Yep.
Then Maine's 2020.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, it's really cool because like the biggest thing that I see about your business is that like the people who I interact with, like the people I've been interacting with for the last 6 months over in Maine, they're still there. The people I've been interacting with in Portsmouth since 2015, some of them are still there. A lot of them have been there for 5-6 years.
Yep.
And it's like
Yeah.
so there's something to that, and you, I've heard you speak about like how, people like a lived experience. You go into somewhere and like you don't want, like for me when I go into somewhere, and maybe not everyone's like this. Some people want to put their their order in the phone and have zero interaction and pick their
Yep.
coffee up because it has their name on it because they got to go. And actually, I don't. Maybe introverted people, maybe they want that. I don't know, but I feel like everybody truly wants a little giddy up, and you get it at the coffee shop. That's where we've always gotten it, and so that's what you guys do. You go in there, it's friendly, people smile. They know you a little bit. And that's having that interaction is so valuable now in this day and age.
Yeah.
It's just something. It's something that you guys must focus on, obviously, because it's something that it shines through pretty obviously.
Thanks. Yeah. I think it's always been part of the fabric of what we do, and probably because we evolved out of the farmers markets, because to me that was such a lucky thing. I will say thank you, friend Holly Morasic, who initially, I remember I had started White Heron in Portsmouth. Actually, I was down in the near WSCA, Portsmouth Community Radio. I was in the same building for 1 year until I ran out of money and needed more space. But what happened is, like, I started my little wholesale company. It was an uphill battle. And then my friend Holly said, hey, my friend Abby is, the president of the, Farmers Market Association, the Seacoast Growers Farmers Market Association. And so I met her and talked, and they had room for an organic tea company. So I started doing that. And then eventually brought samples of tea, and then I started bringing tea by the cup and chai, and then eventually food, and then we started roasting coffee, and that's kind of where we evolved from. But I feel like it's really been a big part of. I really appreciate the farmers markets, and not just from because like actually locally some other companies that got their you might know this Stonewall Kitchen in York.
Mm-hmm.
They started at the Portsmouth Farmers Market, I believe.
Cool.
And other businesses locally that have spent time at a market that, grew to a point where then the market didn't make sense for them. But even when we stopped doing markets, I mean, I still love farmers markets. We just got too busy and for us moving out of the markets, it also made space for somebody else to come in and do something and have it be a little bit of a business incubator for them. But I felt like what I really appreciate about the farmers market is you're really looking at a slice of community, people that care about where food and what they consume comes from, and that come there to help support the local vendors and the local farmers. And so they're definitely, actually, when we opened in Portsmouth, there was a little bit of a challenge because we had a bunch of new, younger staff that were all very nice, but they were just accustomed to the way that, I don't know, most businesses were at the time. You just come in, you clock in, you look at your phone, and you chit chat with your friends or whatever. And at our very first White Heron staff meeting, which was probably like 2013, I remember saying to everybody, hey, I'm really glad to have all you guys here. It's really important for you to remember that even though this might be your first day or your first week or your first month here, that this company's been around for 8 years, and people know us as we are authentically friendly. We're not fake. We don't just have funny little slogans just for the company. I said, we care about the people that walk in the door. We really just try to, there's a saying I love. I'm trying to remember who actually said it originally, but give the very best that you have, and the best will come back to you. So, and I said, and that's where we come from. I said, yes, hopefully the best will come back to us, but we just try to give the very best that we have and hope that the rest will take care of itself. And that's how we try to do what we're doing. And it took a little while, but eventually we just started becoming that. And to the point where we started having a strong enough staff culture that it wasn't, after a while it stopped being about, having sit down meetings and why did you do this and whatever, with people. Not that we, it's not like we fired a lot of people or anything like that. Really just like, actually sometimes when things came up, we just talk to somebody and say, hey, you know what? You're really awesome at this and awesome at this. But can we talk about this little thing, whatever. And so, but we just try to be human beings and treat people like human beings. And, everybody's important, and my joke, I think in both places, Chickadee and White Heron, has been kind of like, if you're all, and maybe it's because I was in the Coastguard or because my parents used to work at the shipyard, but if you're out in the middle of the ocean and you're on a submarine, everybody is important. I mean, even if you're not on a submarine, it's like everybody on, and I was a dishwasher in the restaurant business for a long time. And it's kind of like, who doesn't need their dishes washed? Everybody was nice to me, but everybody is important, and so we just try to be human. I don't know, my term for it is a human scale business, kind of like where it's like everybody that walks in the door deserves our respect and to be authentically welcomed. And the same thing with staff. It's kind of like, one of the things I enjoy is walking through the building and saying hello to everybody. Hey, how you doing? And, it's like we're all doing what we are, and, different things come up in life, but we all just try to be there for each other, and it makes life easier.
Let me introduce you to Elevate, a premium functional mushroom company focused on supporting your highest potential. They offer a range of powerful supplements crafted from the finest medicinal fungi designed to naturally enhance your well-being. Elevate carries everything from mushroom tinctures, capsules, and teas to their delicious mushroom-infused coffees. All of their products are made with USA-grown mushrooms and contain only wild medicinal mushrooms, no psychoactive compounds. I personally use their Focus Tincture every day and love their chai tea blend. It's my go-to for a calming yet energizing boost. Elevate's products support mental clarity, immunity, and overall vitality. They ship nationwide, so whether you're new to functional mushrooms or already a fan, Elevate has something for you. Check them out at shopelevatemushrooms.com, where you will find a detailed description of each product and experience the difference for yourself. Yeah, if you run it like a, more like a, it is a business, but if you run, more like a family, and you can, you have each other's backs, like it's those clean cut operations, that are corporatized, and you see them like, and maybe things will change. I hope not. Portsmouth is changing. Those businesses don't usually, make it, not here. They don't make it here. There needs to be some type of authentic connection to, to the community, or that needs to be created. Usually, that's actually that's a very interesting question, because even since I've been here in the 10 years I've been here, I've seen like, massive drastic change. Yeah. And some, for instance, like, my wife and I, we lived in Portsmouth. I lived right down White Heron, right? And so before the pandemic, I was fully able to afford a house in Portsmouth and was planning to do so. And then the pandemic happened, and then that's now, probably not as possible, as possible as it was before.
Yep.
And that changed everything. That changed everything. It changed the businesses that are coming into Portsmouth now. It changes the people that are in the community now. And I don't want to like jump out and say that's a bad thing just because I was kept out or whatever. But like it I don't know. I'm curious to see somebody who's lived here for a long time and is a part of the community and runs a business in the community to you see what's going on in Portsmouth and the greater seacoast.
Boy, there is a lot going on, and that's one thing that's getting harder for a lot of businesses. And Yeah, it's funny. Yes, like you said, we're a business, but we try to be people focused more than anything, people and what we're doing. But I definitely feel like that's one thing that I'm seeing, and it gets harder for staff because um, like in Portsmouth, I believe it's only 2 staff members that we have that actually live in Portsmouth. Um, and it's just, people end up having to live further and further away. And so and we do our best to try it. We try to pay everyone fairly and try to keep up with everything the best we can. It's such a juggle, for sure.
It's a
But
huge challenge, man. Like that,
yeah,
yeah, I can't even imagine. Like you said, that's it. Yeah, someone who's working in the service industry, that's usually a job that like is within town. I saw someone actually posted like on and I never even really look at this stuff, but on like one of the Facebook, the Portsmouth Facebook page the other day, they had posted just it's always like the thing whenever there's new housing, they get really the service people. There's always comments about like, oh, what about the service people?
yeah,
And like people that commented on there like other people drive 1 or 2 hours to work every day. Everyone drives 1 or 2 hours to work or whatever every day. And it's like, yeah, but not service people. It's always been people who have been locally around in the cities to service these jobs. And so then it creates onus on you to have to pay these people more to have them because now they're traveling to come in. It's a more job where you're expected to travel from. So and like it just you want to know what one thing too, like and maybe this has been good. I don't know. They tell me it's good, but like the just the parking in Portsmouth, the way that
oh
they
geez,
enforce parking
yeah,
is like so ridiculous. Like the tickets that they want to they want to give people, and like it's not inclusive anymore. It's not like and I don't know. I don't want to talk about it badly because I love it. I do. I love
yeah.
I love it, but I just don't want. I want it to be able to be accessible for more folk.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree, and it's kind of like yeah, it's tricky. Like I was born in Portsmouth, so it's like I didn't grow up in Portsmouth per se, but I grew up going to Portsmouth for almost everything, and it's changed so much in my lifetime, and where I remember, I believe parking used to be free on Sundays, et cetera, and obviously a city has expenses and things that change over time, but I guess really honestly what I worry about for my Portsmouth business neighbors in other parts of town, and but also that I experience as just a person and as a customer going downtown for things is it just it's hard enough to find parking, and yes, you could walk 5 or 6 blocks from a parking garage, but for somebody like we don't have a downtown coffee shop. Thankfully, we have some parking at White Heron in the West End. But if we had a downtown White Heron coffee shop, it would be very challenging for people to stop in and grab an English muffin sandwich and a coffee, and like, where do you have to park? How much is it going to cost you to park just to get your quick in and out thing? And we don't have a drive through at either location, but and it's complicated, but
It
like
is complicated.
but it is one of the things that I appreciate at the West End at White Heron on Islington Street in Portsmouth. I really appreciate that we have some parking that is fortunate, and likewise at Chickadee here on 236 we have some parking, but it's like yeah, as things grow and they get busier, it's definitely a busier place than it was when I grew up.
Yeah, and change is inevitable, so I don't know if it's like good or bad, but the fact you saying that, imagine that, guys, like one of the most successful cafes in Portsmouth, you wouldn't open up downtown because why would you? Like the Starbucks, the Starbucks that just closed there, that's a coffee shop place. I wouldn't open up a coffee shop there, because like you said, there's not that many people who go into downtown Portsmouth to work. It's not that many folk. It's a lot less than, at least a lot less than you think. And that's just from my experience as somebody who's lived in cities like Boston.
Mm-hmm.
And there's still people there, don't get me wrong, to support some of these businesses, but it's like they're not they're not bustling. You know, it's not like they're all the breakfast places. There's, you know, they're not all bustling in the morning. You know, you have your, you know, 10, 20 customers, and that's usually pretty consistent. So I'm just curious, you know, about like, would you open up a shop downtown?
Well, I will say basically at this point, I don't want to open up any more shops. I have enough. I have enough going on. So it's kind of like like I wouldn't say I'm not down on downtown. You know, it's just changed a lot.
Yeah.
And you know, even in the last 10 or 15 years, it's changed so much that and you know, sometimes it's like I will say that like even when Bull Moose moved out of downtown, that changed downtown.
It changed downtown.
It did change, like, you know, so who did that? Was that the city? No, that wasn't. That was actually Bull Moose just making it, you know, probably a necessary change for them, but it shifted gears for the vibe of downtown. And that just happens, you know, it's not like they got, you know, probably as a company, it's, and I guess I have, especially as a business owner that's been around for a while now, I don't know everybody in town, and I don't have opinions about every little thing, but I have empathy for, you know, everyone in terms of whatever they're struggling with. And I definitely feel like, I mean, if I had a downtown cafe, I would certainly, I'm stubborn as hell. And so I would certainly make a go of it. And I would try to make it as cool and as fun and you know, flexible and as accessible as we certainly could. But I just know myself at this point, I'm too busy as it is. So,
and you have a great model. You have your model. To be honest, like for me, your model is that I can drive my car there. It's probably why I chose to. You know, I mean, I had a relationship with you first because I lived really close and I could walk. But it's when the next time that I went, you know, when I moved away, I moved over to Maine for a bit. And still to this day, if I'm going to Portsmouth and I want to get coffee, I immediately think White Heron because I can park my car there and because the staff is great and I get to have that, you know, shared experience and the coffee's wonderful. But what a giddy up that is, you know, and to go towards that, you know, like it's almost necessary, like it's necessary. And then it's great how people in the Portsmouth location like can bring their laptops and do work, and you know, that creates a vibe and people want to come in there. And you know, there's like, you know, like Book and Bar, you know, there was the, you know, no offense, I you know, no offense to the person who owned Book and Bar, but like that had the vibe. It had the vibe, but the coffee was so bad. So like, you know, the coffee was just really bad, and it was just, you know, so for me that was downtown. So there wasn't as many people there doing that. You know, it was more of like let's park and then let's go read a book, opposed to like, hey, let's actually use this as like a workspace, or, you know, someplace where I can have a meeting with somebody and meet up with them. There's less of that at someplace like Book and Bar. So it's great. It's just great. It's great that you have that you had the parking, and that you know, you have it at both places at, you know, White Heron and Chickadee.
Yeah. And it's, you know, I will say one of the things that I really do enjoy, because I live close enough. I live in Eliot, but I live close enough to Portsmouth and Chickadee that I often bike commute. And so one of the things I really enjoy in bike commuting is because parking is so busy in downtown Portsmouth, a little bit spendy, let's be honest. But I honestly, I mean, and that's one of those things where for, you know, a lot of the downtown businesses that I love and I still try to support and frequent, you know, because I love, like one of the places that when I was growing up and I used to go to as a teenager was Ceres Bakery. Mm-hmm. And Ceres Bakery to me is just as cool as ever. You know, they're the real deal.
Yes.
They've been, you know, baking up a storm and being friendly, just everyday folks, you know, for the longest time. And so I still like to go in there, and it's nice, you know, they've been a long time supporter of White Heron, offering our chai and sometimes teas and things like that as well. But, you know, and, you know, River Run Books just closed down or changed hands. But, you know, I like going to, so I've enjoyed going to River Run and Sheaf Street Books, and you know, I'm not against new businesses, et cetera, but of course, you know, we all have the things that become part of the fabric of who we are. You know, I grew up going to the press room and playing music at the press room, and now still going to see friends and, you know, play music at the press room, et cetera.
That's really cool. That's really cool. That's really cool. But it needs, like you said, hopefully it stays that way. You know, like I don't think the press room's going anywhere. You know, that did just change hands, you know, a little while ago. You know, the people that are doing what's the name of the kid? I know the kid's first name, but I'm not even gonna say it because he's gonna come on the show and we're gonna talk about it. It's gonna be great. But we, you know, the like having that, like my hometown, like I go home and there's in the South Shore of Massachusetts, there's like we have this thing called and someone listen to this, some business owner listen to this, do this in the seacoast, you'll fucking make a, you know, restaurants are obviously hard to run. This one you'll crush it and you'll do really well. So in the South Coast of Massachusetts, we have this thing called bar-sized pizza. You know, single individual pizzas. It's bar size. It's individual personalized pizzas. It's crispy. It's it's maybe 8 inches. They do it in a pan, and in a small pan, and it's crispy. And the pieces are little baby triangles, and you eat it, and it's the best pizza of all time. Like it's great, and it crushes. Like there's a place called the Town Spa that, opened in the 70s, and, on a bit, they have a line for 2 hours on a busy night, and they take they're cash only.
Yeah.
They're cash only, demanding that, saying, no, we're not going to pay the credit card fees, cash only, go use the ATM.
Yeah. Yep.
We have an ATM over there. It's going to charge you $5, but go use it because we know you love our pizza so much.
Yep.
And there's I guess they've fallen off a little bit from what I hear, but, there's other places that are like this. And so, it's just they're when I go home, that's an expectation.
Yep.
When I go back to Easton, that's an expectation. That's something that I'm going to be able to get is bar-sized pizza somewhere.
Sure.
Now, Portsmouth, that it would suck if that didn't be the case. If that changes for me and I can't get that, or if I have to go somewhere else or something's different, like, and I feel like that do you feel like that's happening in Portsmouth a little bit, or is there enough that's being replaced that's creating there's enough white herons popping up or staying around that are keeping the flow of things pretty natural.
Boy, it's I agree with you that I do feel like it's important I mean, it's hard because so many times with businesses, it's just what is the lifetime of a business, and one thing I thought was interesting when I lived in Portland, Oregon, and Oregon as a state is pretty young, or like a city like Portland compared to like a place like Portsmouth, you know what I mean? But the thing that's interesting, they have a couple of businesses in Portland, Oregon. I'm going to forget the name, or I'll remember the name of at least one. But there's a company out there called McMenamins. It's McMenamins Brothers Breweries and things like that. But one of the things they do that's kind of cool is they've purchased some historic properties, and they rebrand them a little bit, but they also try to leave them largely, at least half or more, kind of the way that they always were. And one of the places in Portland, Oregon, if it's still there, is McMenamins White Eagle. But it used to be the White Eagle Hotel, and I believe has been in business in one sense or another for over 100 years. And I think there's an Irish pub that's like that downtown. But it's interesting that in Portsmouth, a city that's been around for a few hundred years, I'm trying to think of what the oldest existing business that would still be. I mean, even the press rooms, it's been around for decades. But I don't know if there's any business in Portsmouth I'm sure there's a business. I don't know if it's a downtown retail business that's been there for over 100 years in any sense. But I do feel like it's nice to, I guess what I take pride in as being hopefully part of the fabric of the city now that we've been there for 12 years. And even doing, since farmers market days, White Heron's been rocking it in Portsmouth for just about 20 years now. But I do feel like, I guess that's something that we really try to do as well we just try to be real. We just try to be authentic, real people, real food and beverage made by real, yes, we're a business, but it feels like we just always try to make sure that we're doing the important stuff while they're, and at the same time, hopefully we're one of the cool little neighbors around town that, doing our best to stick around as well. We're still there. So
yeah, don't knock on wood because you're doing it. Your model's proved and, is proven. Like and I think it's all like you said. It is probably a natural thing that takes place, and but if you even look at it, like the architecture, go look at to your point. Like I love when things take something old and make it a little bit new and keep a little bit of the giddy up in there. But even the architecture in Portsmouth, like you said, and maybe it did start with bull moose. That what a moment,
I don't know.
Like
I don't know.
I don't know either, but like the architecture, if you go down there now, what do they call it? The hearth.
Yeah.
The hearth.
Yeah.
That's a very different looking building for for Portsmouth. So, and that's actually like one of my favorite things to do. I was telling you earlier, I like to dance and go out and express myself that way, and so like that's what I love to do in Portsmouth too. And that's changing a little bit, but that's okay. And so I would go out and I would dance, and then I would go around and I would just marvel at this architecture, and it's unbelievable. And maybe I'll marvel at the hearth too, because that is some cool architecture. It's pretty cool, but it just feels so much more modern and so much more not Portsmouth, right off. So it's cool to be like a transplant in the city, but also to be somebody who has, has been here for quite some time and has, my son was born here, so like that, it's a part of me, I got married here. So it's a full, and I plan to live here for a while. And so it fascinates me. It fascinates me where it will go. And I'm just so glad. And I tell you, Jonathan, I always hope that when I pull up and I take that left off of Crate Street, that I will see White Heron, because that just makes me feel good, still. And I could venture to guess that there's a lot of people in Portsmouth that feel that way too, that when they drive by it, it gives them solace because there is so much rapid change. And the city's always been about rapid change. Like you said, businesses don't necessarily, it's hard to do business in Portsmouth. You got to be a good business person and you got to figure it out and make it work. But the solace of that, I bet there's a lot of people who have they drive by your shop in Portsmouth and they see it and they're like, in Papa Wheelies too, it's just like, shared space there. And that building specifically is like, oh man, not shared space, but right down the street, and it's like that little, corner, like people, if that changes, people would be stressed, I think.
Well, it's funny. One you asked earlier about my business partner in Portsmouth, Jay McSherry. One way, actually, I think one thing that Jay's done that I think is helpful for downtown. Like, I don't even know but I think because a lot of the people that he has as business partners sometimes may have either worked for Jay or with Jay in some way or another, but have an idea. I never worked for Jay. He just happened to be, several of his restaurants they carried White Heron. And so around the time that I needed to figure out what I was doing and how to take the next step, I talked to him and we ended up becoming business partners. But what I think is cool, and I didn't expect, because White Heron, we've always been kind of fun and funky. But when it came to the building, because when I partnered with Jay and we were trying to figure out where to open up, the building that we're in on Islington Street now, it was just a gray concrete building that used to be a baby furniture store that had been unoccupied for years. And I pointed out to Jay and I said, hey, that place is for rent or for sale. And Jay ended up deciding to buy the building. And then, of course, we went through all this stuff trying to figure out how to open. But then when it came, what color to paint the building, and he said, yeah, why not make it bold? And I'm like, okay, bold. I'm like, what do you think? And he said, oh, ask here, and the graphic designer, Dylan Haig, who helped us do a lot of the early White Heron branding, Jay had said, oh, ask Dylan what he thinks. And so Dylan's like, I wonder if he'd do this bright teal. And so I mentioned it to Jay, and Jay just said, cool. And I was like, whoa. But so I give Jay a lot of credit for that, because if he had just been like a, super conservative kind of like, oh, let's just paint it beige or whatever, it would be a different experience. But because he was willing to take a risk as the building owner and as a new business partner of like, let's paint this building a bright color. And then even because we're always internally pushing the envelope a little bit, and a few years back I was like, hey Jay, what if we paint a mural on the front of the building? He's like, show me what it's going to look like. And so, but anyways, he's cool. And so,
You showed him. He said, cool.
yeah, well, that's pretty much a whole conversation. But anyways, but Kenley Darling, who's done a bunch of murals around town in Portsmouth, she did Shalimar, and she actually, she's a fantastic artist, and she also, she's a tattooist at Worship Tattoo, right next to White Heron now. But anyways, Kenley had an idea based on our White Heron brand colors, and so I showed it to Jay, and he was like, cool. So, but still, it's like, he's the landlord and my business partner, but it's not like I'm saying, come on, Jay, it's not like I talked him into it. I mean,
He's into it.
No, but I thought that was great because, it's allowed us to also just be ourselves and be artistic and kind of, and to me, I felt like we decided to do that once we hit the 10-year mark, because I feel like it's really important too, especially for businesses that have been around for a while, or at least in our case. I just feel like sometimes businesses that have been around 10, 15, 20 years or more, sometimes they get kind of stale and watered down after a while. And I feel like it's always important to
Juice it up a little bit.
yeah, to juice it up, or basically be like, hey, we're still here. We're still the same people. Like, as far as I'm concerned, we're, White Heron and now at Chickadee. We're the same people we've always been since we started anything. I mean, I'm not like, I work at least as hard as I ever did. I just do different stuff. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, sure, maybe, I guess sometimes people end up thinking, oh, the business owner just sits around counting money and all that. It's not quite that simple.
If they only do, dude.
But it keeps life interesting. It's like we still do, everything that we're doing, we're doing proactively.
You're still a part of, and you're still a part of it, and you're proactively doing it, and like like the fact that you're like that you're wanting to like, so many people would have just been like, hey, I'm 55, I've crushed this, I've done really well, like I have the White Heron brand. Like, yeah, let's just keep it the White Heron brand. You're like, nope, let's juice it up. Let's juice it up, baby. Let's call it Chickadee.
We thought it would be, also the other thing that we found after 5 years of being White Heron Maine, which has been fine. There haven't really been any major problems. But because we've always been financially separate, things like gift cards did not work between the two, or loyalty cards. And also people would get confused. But at the same time, I feel like I also, on the Maine side of the bridge, things are a little different. And I also kind of felt like, like I think it's cool that locally, like another like Lil's in Kittery, they have two other sister cafes that are all related, Islander Cafe and Stella's. And to me, that makes sense. It's kind of like they can have whatever they.
Where are those? Where's Island Cafe and Stella's?
Islander is in Newcastle.
Okay.
And Stella's is in Dover.
Oh, okay. I know Stella's. Yeah, I know Stella's.
They were both other cafes previously, but anyways,
and you want to know what's funny about that though? It's like not funny about it, but just an observation. That's like a venture capitalist. Like when they go out and buy, like for instance, they might go out and buy 10 different hardware stores. Ace Hardware might go out and buy 10 hardware stores. They're not going to rebrand them to Ace anymore because Pete's Hardware Store has been crushing it in West Valley, Wisconsin, for this long. So they're going to keep it as Pete's, but it's going to be owned by.
Sure.
So that's like more of, it's kind of like that model, right? It's like to have your different giddy ups and to have your underneath like the restaurant group, it's your restaurant group and you have different restaurants, they're different sisters. And it's a way that you can be more creative. I think cause that was one thing like that. I get a certain smoothie in Portsmouth. I went to the first time going to Maine, and I wasn't able to get that same smoothie, right? So I think there's difference in menus, and then I've come to now appreciate that a lot because there's like some different things and some things that hold over, and
exactly, yeah.
So it's an evolution, and it's cool to see that you like realize it because you could have, like you said, there was some practical reasons to do it. Yeah, sure, but you've been dealing with that shit for 5 years, and that you could have kept dealing with it, and it wasn't that big of a deal. Guess what's probably harder, like rebranding, So it was awesome. It was
a lot of work, but in a way, it's kind of fun too, and it's and it has been that kind of thing for 5 years where it's like because people would tell me like, oh, I love this thing that you had in Eliot, and how come I can't get that in Portsmouth, or vice versa? And it's kind of like, and I just, my wife and I just decided it's kind of like, it's fine for them to, we could still be all part of the same family. And because we're not planning to open 20 more cafes or anything like that. We just want to make everything that we're doing cool. And nothing else has changed. It's all the same ownership, and we still have the same dedication to keeping things, tasty and fun and interesting and
real and healthy
and real. Yeah.
And that's the thing that I want to talk about. We all know how important strength training is for long-term health, but it can be hard to know where to start. I was in the same spot a year ago. You want to make sure you're doing exercises right, avoiding injury, and getting results, but it's easy to feel lost without a plan. That's when I found On Target Fitness. At On Target, you get a custom strength program, personalized attention in a small group setting, and the nutrition coaching you need for real lasting change. And the year I've been working out there, I've gotten stronger, more mobile, and more confident. My form has improved, and even something as simple as walking feels better. The group energy keeps me motivated, and every workout is fun. On Target just opened a new location in Kingston. Now you've got even more options to experience their amazing approach. If you're ready for lasting change, head to www.ontargetfit.com and schedule your session today. You went away from your organic label, because that, but none of your practices have actually changed besides the paperwork on the back end.
Yes.
That's curious, right? Like you've mentioned it a few times in the show already. Like we like to focus on less pesticides, less bad chemicals. The more natural you can give something to someone, the closer to freshness you can give someone. Giddy up.
Yes.
So what's up with the organic, certification? Why did you guys move away from it?
Excellent question. So we were organic certified for 18 years, most of which by New Hampshire Department of Agriculture, Markets, and Food. But in or around the pandemic time, they started having we had the same organic inspector for 16 consecutive years, which was great. But what happened is something changed with New Hampshire Department of Ag, and I think what it was is they just didn't have enough help to sustain, and there might have been even more organic businesses opening up, et cetera. And I think they just found at a certain point they just didn't have the staff to support it. And so what happened is suddenly, with I think it was like 2 months notice, we either had the choice of dropping organic certification or scrambling to get recertified by another certifying agency. And because we were so dyed in the wool, we didn't have a quick and easy option to swap out of it. So in a scramble, I had to, in 2 months, almost drop everything and like work till 10 or 11 o'clock at night, almost every single day of the week for like a while to convert everything and go through getting recertified with somebody else. And then it turned out that the cost of it had vastly gone up as well. For the longest period of time, we paid, let's say, under $1,000 a year to be organic certified as a business, but that wasn't the only cost. There had always been a year-round labor cost, for all types of logging. There was so much, literally everything had to be traceable, which I understand in the regard that, if you buy an organic product, you want to know that it's an organic product. Somebody didn't call it organic. And so in order to prove that, there do have to be systems in place to make that traceable. But I will say it felt like once we had no choice. We either had to like switch gears and we switched gears, but it turned out that, a lot of the USDA National Organic Program rules were changing and increasing. There were more rules and regulations, and between the cost of certification tripling for us, plus having to do all these things, and we're just thinking, how many things, there's an expression, maybe you've heard, do you want to be the fastest, the cheapest, or the best? Pick two. You know what I mean? You can't do everything.
Yep.
And just realizing like, at the time, and it was, I probably lost a lot of sleep at the time before deciding to drop organic certification. But I thought, what would happen if we drop organic certification, but we still continue to supply organic teas and coffees? And still, if you walk into Chickadee Tea Coffee Eats or White Heron Tea and Coffee in Portsmouth, 100% of the teas and coffees we offer are still organic. What you are legally allowed to do in labeling is, if you flip over the package on the back under ingredients, we can list what the organic ingredients are.
Nice.
But on the front of the label, we can't say anything, so we don't. But at this point, we've been around long enough. It was a ton of work to undo all of the organic labeling, right? Think of all the printed labels and all the stuff like that. And then, at one point, we had up to 80 different teas, and between teas and coffee, talk about having over 100 organic ingredients that you're working with. And so it was a huge switch over just to basically label ourselves as sustainably sourced and retool all the labels and the back labels and things like that. And so, but thankfully, now that that's done, we could still offer the same high quality organic teas and coffees that we have been. We just can't call them organic on the front,
Yeah.
It's a big deal.
It's a big deal,
Oh my
dude.
God,
It's
yes.
like,
Yep.
I feel like it should be easier. If you're fucking doing the right thing,
Yeah.
you should be able to, to put it on your label, but of course, that's just like how things are there. It's like some things are insidious, they're insidious that way. And I think it's more important that we just have good human beings operating good businesses. There's no regulation that's the thing is like, people talk about like regulation so much and how that's going to be helpful. And I think that their regulation, obviously it's necessary. You do need it 100%, or people would be, taking advantage of the situations a lot. But if you just do what you guys are doing and do the right thing, just do the right thing. Like that seems like it's such a better mantra and mode to live by.
Yeah, and going back to the farmers market, that's one of the things I really like with the farmers market, because when you walk around, you walk by somebody, and because they can't say organic on their sign, but they can say no spray and ask us for, you're just talking to a real person who grew stuff, and they can tell you how they grew it and what they did, and I never felt like I had any reason to not trust that, and but I think it's a good time in the world to basically, with all the craziness or whatever, et cetera, to basically, keep things local. If you know your neighbors and you support your local neighbors and businesses and things like that, you can have a connection that because when you're buying, I mean, obviously we all have to go to the store and buy this or that. And sometimes it's a big brand. You don't know the people, you don't know their family or whatever. And but I feel like the more that we can keep things close to home, or like going back to the conversation about meat or animal products or things like that, at least if you are talking to people that are, raising things in a meat in a humane way, and what's real, right? How do you know what's real? And at least if you can communicate with real people. And, I feel like that's another thing that we've always tried to do to the best of our ability at White Heron and Chickadee is, in terms of local and regional sourcing, because that's the way life used to be.
Yeah, simple.
That's been kind of my joke about Maine that I think is funny. Is like, I feel like the other Maine slogan should be Maine, the way life used to be.
Maine, the way life used to be.
It kind of is in a lot of places. So.
It is kind of like that. That's a good saying.
All right, I'm going to print up some T-shirts.
Yeah, I'll wear one. You know it. Yeah, man, you're hitting on some really fascinating points to me. The organic thing, and just doing the right thing by people. That's the thing. And this is a point that I'll bring up. It's like the same thing that you said about the business people who come in and do the right thing, about the architecture and about the way businesses are run, and to put Portsmouth back. So Mike Labrie, I've had him on the show, who owns Jimmy's.
Yep.
He owns a couple restaurants in town, and we went into his conversation. We went pretty in depth into why he kept the YMCA building the way it did. And thank God.
Yeah.
Thank God. Because imagine that. Imagine if that had changed, right? Like, so it's so important to have that authentic human being experience, and to, you know, to, like, if you're doing it for, I think that the best way to trust somebody, you know, that there's so many systems that already exist in the world that we say is the right, you know, medicine, for instance. This is safe, and you're going to take this because it's safe because of all these regulations, because it's been made in this really clean aseptic room by this really smart person that's doing it this way. And that I know that to be fact, to be not the case. I know that to be learned, and to be and opposed to when you go to a farmer's market and you get to ask when I'm in the grocery store, I can't ask I can ask the produce person, like, hey man, what was going on with these carrots? You know, do you know if they were sprayed at all? Do you know what was going? You know, these ones say they're organic. Like, what farm were they grown on? They don't. Of course, they don't know, and you know that's what's been created that way. When I go to the farmer's market, you know, Jordan from Two Toed Farm.
Yeah, I know Jordan.
Yeah, baby, giddy up. Jordan and Mary Beth, they're the homies.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, they're awesome, and so I walk in there, and it's funny. I spend more money there than I can. You know, I spend not more than I can. I shouldn't say that, but because I budget it appropriately so I can spend, if I have to spend a little bit more to help somebody locally, because I know what they're doing, because I've been to their farm. I've seen what they're doing. And Jordan tells me, no, of course we didn't spray this shit. Get these carrots. Grab some yogurt that Mary Beth got from her cows. Some feta. This week, like. And then go over there and get some unenriched bread from Jackie and the Humble Loaf, and that's actually a cool thing that I've seen. Like, there, to my earlier point, that sometimes there are, you lose a little bit of it, and but there's other, there's other white herons that are growing right now, and this woman Jackie from the Humble Loaf Bakery, she's badass. Like, she does up in Sanford, the Sanford Market, and then she does like the Wentworth Gardens Market. Yeah. Did you ever do the Wentworth Gardens Market?
Yep. We did that for we did the very first one, I believe.
Cool.
Yeah, when the first winter markets came around, we were part of it.
Yeah, what a great local thing. You get to go up and look the person in the face, and sometimes they're just the market person, and so they're not but you can ask that question, and that market person, they at least know the owner, and you can have a conversation with them about it, and I like that. That's the real food scene. Like, I make it a point to bring my son to this stuff, to show him, like, hey, this is where we should be getting our food, and like having these relationships. And then, like, I have such deep relationships with people in the market that I don't need to go to the market. I just go to them. I go to their house. I go to I hit them up. I say, hey, this is what I need. And so they're just it's really good people, and that trust you can't get. You can make up a bunch of pieces of paper, and you can talk about regulation, you can do all this stuff, and you can have an inspector and all these people, but the real giddy up is human being to human being contact and trust and conversation.
Yeah. And also getting back to something that you were saying about some of the pharmaceutical stuff. Oh my God, I could tell you something that it gave me heart palpitations. When I was in Oregon, I was a waiter at a real high-end place that actually was cool. It was, a place called Wildwood. But I remembered at one point I would end up waiting on a bunch of big parties in this private function room. But a lot of times it was, these big, it was pharmaceutical companies that were hosting a bunch of doctors, and they were wining and dining them with the $200 bottle or whatever expensive bottles of wine and all that. And I remember at one point, one of the doctors who was just asking an honest question, like, I couldn't tell because they were talking about the drug there, the presentation, and he was just saying, I couldn't tell if it was working, so I prescribed more. Is that what I should do? And I'm thinking, like, is this how decisions are made? Like, how are exactly.
And you want to know what? Like, that's what's really sad is it is how some decisions are made. It's like, what? Well, yeah. Well, how could we best exploit this person and make profit off of this person? Using this pharmaceutical drug. Like, it's yeah. Then at the same time, there's so many beautiful, smart, brilliant researchers.
Sure.
Who can't even. But Jonathan, their research. We've had tons of people on the show in the show that their research gets retracted because they have real research that then goes up to the journal, and the journal has some type of venture capital relationship, and they say, nope, this isn't going to work. Sorry, this doesn't work because we have this other drug that we're promoting. So if this research says this, so it's like, yeah, man, drugs are bad. Pharmaceuticals are bad. They're not all bad. 10 to 15% of them are probably great and amazing.
Yeah.
But and I love pharmacy, as like what it is in its authenticity. The true, the alchemy of real pharmacy is beautiful and wonderful. But like where it is now is horrible. And that's so funny. Those dinners, they're more. Back then, they were like the Wild West. Someone could have left there with a trip too. It's like, oh, this guy's crushing it. He's prescribed so many drugs this month. Here's a trip to
go
Cabo.
to Disneyland.
Your kids are going to Disneyland. Yeah, exactly. Giddy up.
Whoa.
And so like what a crazy racket. I've been to these dinners and had some of these conversations, and like to be honest, like I was a person who's worked for some of these companies and understood this. Like they don't. Some of these reps who do this stuff, like they have an understanding of it, but it's all this. It's this narrow. It's very narrow, and this is what we're going to make you believe, and it's not the answer.
I can imagine.
The answer's in the markets. It's in the trust.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, Jonathan, where can the people find you if they I think they know where they can find you, but for anyone who in my audience, if that how I ask everybody, so how can they find you?
Okay, well, here in Eliot, Maine, we're at Chickadee Tea Coffee Eats at 43 Route 236 in Eliot. We're right on the border of Kittery, so sometimes people think we're in Kittery, but we are actually in Eliot. And in Portsmouth, we're White Heron Tea and Coffee at 601 Islington Street, where we've been since 2013. And in either place, you can find us at chickadeemaine.com or whiteherontea.com. Okay. Yeah, and thanks for having.
Yeah, Jonathan.
Good to see you guys.
Yeah, brother. Thanks so much for coming on today. I'm excited to see where our relationship goes and to continue to build this within the community as I become a part of it.
Yeah.
Continue to be a part of it. So
welcome. Glad you're here.
Giddy up, baby. Guys, thank you so much. Please like, subscribe. Woo! Check out Jonathan. Go grab a cappuccino at White Heron. Get an all-day breakfast wrap. Get a smoothie. These guys are the best. We'll see you next time.
All
Giddy
right.
up.
Take care.